Hello and welcome to A Stitch in Time. Today is Tuesday, November 6, 2018, and this is episode 78. My name is Carol and you can find me on Ravelry as Knits and Pearls. The show notes for this and every episode can be found on the blog and also in the episode thread in the Ravelry group. If you'd like to get in touch, please do so via private message on Ravelry, by leaving a comment on YouTube, or by leaving a comment in the group, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today on this currently overcast, previously showery day here in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, Canada. I've had quite a bit of rain lately, although it has been balanced out with a few sunny breaks. What can we say? This is fall weather here in this corner of the world, and you'd think we'd be used to it by now, but I think it's pretty typical for people to complain when it's too hot, complain when it's too wet, complain when it's too cold. We're never really satisfied, are we? One good thing about this weather is it makes for some cozy days indoors. Even when you're doing housework, it feels cozy. Although it's much more fun if you're knitting or sewing or reading. And I've been able to do a fair bit of that this past week. Before I get into today's episode and share finished projects, the works in progress, some reading, some sewing, some acquisitions, and even a giveaway, I just want to say thanks to all of you who took the time to reach out to me this past week. I always appreciate hearing from you, and that's what makes doing this podcast so rewarding for me. I can sit here and talk to a camera, but it is great when I hear response back and know that people appreciate the time that it takes to put out this podcast. I know I really enjoy podcasts. I watch them frequently while I knit, and so I'm glad that you also are finding this entertaining enough to tune in week after week. So thank you very much for that. Okay, let's get into it. I'm going to start with what I'm wearing. As I mentioned, it's a little cool and drizzly out there today. So again, it seemed like a perfect day to wear a sweater, and I am wearing my Birkin. I started this last January and completed it, I think, early July. It took a lot of knitting and unknitting and re-knitting, but in the end I was quite satisfied with how it turned out. I'm going to just stand up and give you a quick look at it. This is patterned by Caitlin Hunter. I know many of you are familiar with it. I chose to make a more fitted version, and I also made my sleeves long. Now, the yarn I used was Blacker Swan Falkland Islands 4-ply, and it's quite a soft yarn, but I have to say I have a slight prickle factor going on as I wear this. So I'm going to have to see if it's something I can just kind of adjust to, or if I'm going to have to put a t-shirt under the sweater, which will probably make it much too warm to wear indoors as a rule. So I'm hoping I don't have to do that. Right now it doesn't feel too bad, so maybe I just need to adjust to that. As many people who have made this sweater have found, there are some issues with how the yoke fits. There is not a lot of increasing in this section, between this section and this section, of the color work, which makes for kind of a straight-ish yoke area. And a lot of people find this area tight. I made some modifications in that I found the yoke was also too long for my body, so I split for the sleeves on this middle row of this final leaf motif. And I also, because I didn't want the sweater to be as loose, I did not increase after this final motif for my size as I was instructed to. And so I definitely have a more fitted version. Still can feel a little bit of constriction across this part of my sleeve, But as you can see, I can definitely move, and it rides up slightly, but not enough to really worry about. I can very easily kind of pull it down to fix that. I went into quite a bit of detail on what modifications I did, both on my project page, and then I provided links to episodes 50 through 54 of this podcast. Throughout the process, I tried the sweater on multiple times and pointed out areas of difficulty that I was having with the fit, and it talked about the modifications I was making. And so if this is a sweater you're considering making, maybe you will benefit from some of my feedback. I wish, well, if I'd had that kind of guidance before I started it, I might have found my process a little less frustrating and time consuming. So if it helps one person, I'm happy. I'm thrilled to actually finally get to wear it. As I mentioned, by the time I finished it, it was July, and so I've not worn the sweater yet. So I am quite thrilled to have been able to pull it out of the sweater drawer today and give it its first wearing. I'm just going to take a sip of tea. I've already been yakking a lot and we haven't even started. I'm drinking some Irish breakfast tea from David's Tea. I really like my breakfast teas, and I was in the habit of drinking English breakfast tea, Irish breakfast tea, and David's breakfast tea. And it was very sad to learn that they had discontinued the English breakfast tea. And then even more disappointed when I went to fill up my tin that they've also discontinued their Irish breakfast tea. Of the three, I like the David's breakfast tea the least, but that's the only one they're carrying now. I'm not saying I don't like it, of the three, it's my least favorite. So I actually wrote an email, don't know if it'll do any good, but I wasn't happy to see that they had cut their other choices. But the other day I found a tin of the Irish breakfast. I didn't realize I even had. It was hiding behind the other tin of the Irish breakfast tea I had. So all of a sudden I have, I think it's about half full. So I'm enjoying my last half tin of Irish breakfast very much, because I know that's the last I'm going to have, at least for a while. And speaking of David's Tea, I had an email this morning from them showcasing their new winter mugs. And they have a mug shaped like this that has knit stitches on it. It's kind of in the texture. It comes in white and it comes in purple. And I think it's going to have to go on my Christmas wish list, even though the last thing I need is another mug. How can I resist the knit stitch? So we'll see how indulgent my husband wants to be. He's always complaining about how many mugs we have, and I'm probably going to have to cull some if I'm going to bring another new one into the house. As it is, they don't all fit in the cupboard. But you don't need to know all that. Okay, let's get started with finished projects. So I've been a woman on a mission this past week. I'm feeling somewhat overwhelmed by the number of works in progress I have, especially some that have had going for a while, and I'm just focused on getting some of those finished up so that I can cast on some new things with, I'd say, a clear conscience. But it's not that I ever really feel guilty about my works in progress. It's just more of a sense of having some control over what is becoming an overwhelming number of them for me. So the first thing I set my mind to finishing this week were my Honeybee Dance socks. This is a pair of socks by Helen Stewart. It is the fourth pattern from the Handmade Sock Society. And I knit it from Black Cat Custom Yarn in their Everyday Sock in the Champagne colorway. And it had been a gift from my son last Christmas. It was their January Club colorway. So you've been seeing these for a while. I can't remember when I started them, back in, I think, the summer sometime. So there's sock, well, I don't know which one's sock number 1 and sock number 2, to be honest with you. But there's a close-up look. I'm just going to turn this around so you can see the lace pattern more easily. And as I've mentioned before, I screwed up doing the cable in the first sock. Instead of alternating which way the cable was slanting, I made them slant all the same way on both sides, or on each side. And so that's my design element modification. Unintentional, but I think it looks fine anyway. I wasn't about to go back and redo all that knitting just because of that. So yeah, so there's my 4th pair finished from that collection, and I'm looking forward to casting on the 5th sock, which is called the Hazelnut Socks. I think I know I've shared the pattern with you in the past. It's sitting on my love seat looking at me every time I knit. And once I get another pair or 2 maybe off the needles, then I'll feel like I can cast those on. I already have the yarn picked out. I thought I had it out waiting for me, but I don't see it. So I'll share it with you when I go to knit. This weekend, well, the past few days, I guess is more accurate. I talked to you last week about the fact that my niece's baby shower was coming up this coming Saturday. And I had really wanted to knit the monster pants for the new baby. I hadn't even bought yarn or started or anything. And so on Saturday, we needed to do some errands, which took us close to a Michael's store. So I went in there and bought some yarn to make the Grumpy Bum Monster Longies by Wandering Lady, and cast them on Saturday night and finished them yesterday by just around lunchtime. It's all I knit on for that amount of time, but I'm glad to have gotten them done. So the yarn is nothing special. It's just an acrylic yarn from Loops and Threads called Impeccable. So I'm going to show you the front first because I want to save the best part for last. So I chose this monstery kind of lime green. This is the back side of the mouth. And then I striped it in orange and purple. And you do these little ribbed cuffs so that you can adjust the length of the leg for quite a while. Are you ready? This is the best part. How cute is that? Aren't they cute? I just can't wait to see the little bum crawling on the floor wearing these. Because this is the best part of the whole thing. Here, there's a long shot so you can see how they look in their entirety. You knit the leggings, and then you duplicate stitch on the eyes and the teeth. So this is a free pattern, and so I will always give free patterns a little bit of a pass on the instructions if they're not exactly what I think they should be, because they're free, and people are generous enough to offer up their design for the taking. I try not to be too critical. One thing I'll mention about this pattern is it just tells you to knit the legs to desired length. Because I have no idea how long to knit those legs, because I didn't have a baby handy to measure, plus this is the 6 months to 1.5 years size, so it's quite a range. lengths. I went on Ravelry and looked at different projects and finally decided on 3 repeats of the stripe pattern. And I think it looks fairly proportionate. And then this by taking down these, that will add some length and let them be worn a little bit longer. Another thing is that they suggest that you Kitchener stitch this crotch area. I chose to bind it off, and that is given as an alternative. And before I knit the legs, I did the embroidery in this area because I thought it would be easier to access it if I could get my hands up inside this, because it would have been open. Both the top and bottom were open. So I found that to be the easier way to go rather than waiting till the end when they were all done to do it. Originally, I started with these teeth, and I was looking at a photograph and trying to count the stitches and trying to get a sense of where to place the teeth, how big to make them. And then I did the bottom teeth, doing the same thing. And then I happened to, I think when I had the photo open on the project, on the pattern page, I saw underneath the photo a reference to a link for the eyes and teeth charts, which I had not noticed. It wasn't included in the actual pattern. It was just written on the project page on Ravelry. And so I clicked through to that and thankfully found charts to do the eyes. And I actually took out the teeth, the bottom teeth, and redid them as charted. And actually the top teeth were as I had done them. It's been a long time since I've done duplicate stitch. I got better at it as I went along. I definitely had some errors along the way. But in general, I'm quite pleased with how the face turned out. I actually had a mistake on one eye that I had to duplicate on the other eye to make them match, but unless you look really closely and you know what you're looking for, you would never spot it. So I'm not concerned about that. So anyway, I have to say I am not a lover of baby/child knits and toy knitting, and these kind of incorporated both aspects of them. Plus, I'm not a big fan of knitting with acrylic, but I think in this instance it's appropriate. So let's just say this is one of those projects that I knit solely for the product and not for the process. Now, I know some of you are fairly new to knitting and may not have heard the terms process knitter and product knitter. I am a process knitter pretty well all the way. I like to try interesting constructions. I like the feel of the yarn in my hand. I'm not afraid of ripping out mistakes for the most part, because for me, it's all about the process of getting it right and reaching something I'm happy with in the end. Other people are product knitters and just want to get the product finish the project in order to have the item. So as I say, in this case, this was totally product knitting all the way, and I don't recommend it if you're a process knitter. It's worth doing. I was happy to get this in the end, but I can't say as I really enjoyed the process very much, other than seeing it come together, because again, I just need to leave that up there as long as I can because it is so stinking cute. Oh, another alteration I did is I just did a crochet tie instead of I-cord, as was recommended. Way faster. So I am not sure if it was my husband or myself that decided that I should make a sock monkey hat for the new baby to match his mom's. I think I mentioned last week on the podcast that I had knit my niece a sock monkey hat And that's why I knew she would appreciate the monster pants, because she has that kind of sense of humor. So yeah, whether it was my husband who suggested it or whether I thought of it myself, as soon as I finished the monster pants, I cast on a baby sock monkey hat. So I looked online, I found a pattern by Donna Sayers for newborn through to child sizes. And so I felt it was worth purchasing because I needed guidelines on the sizing. I had no idea. And so I did do that, and I followed the pattern more or less as written for the hat itself and for the ears. But what I did is, here's a picture of my niece's hat. And I had adapted this from a Knitty pattern, Knitty.com pattern. One of the knitters, I don't have her name here, but I've linked it in my project notes for this hat and for my niece's hat. She had provided a chart in order to duplicate stitch the mouth and nose onto the hat. And so I modified that chart to make it smaller to fit on the baby hat, so that this hat would more closely resemble my niece's hat. And so here we are. Can I just say I'm the world's worst pom-pom maker? I never make them thick enough. I always think there's plenty of yarn and then they're always kind of floppy. But that's okay, because Donna's hat looks like that too, so they'll really match. I think it turned out cute. I don't have no clue how long this will fit little Jeremy. I don't think it matters. I just think Donna's gonna get a real kick out of having a matching mom and baby hat set. So I'm anxious to wrap these up and see her reaction on Saturday. So again, total product knit. Not big on this. Too closely resembles a toy for my liking. Not my kind of knitting at all. Again, it's acrylic. It's tedious. It's, you know, gotta do the embroidery, all that. But it's worth it in the end. Look how cute. So those are my finished projects for this week. And I think I deserve a medal for the last two, just for managing to get through them. I knit on nothing else from Sunday afternoon until last night at about 9 o'clock. So I'm glad they're done. Now I can just go back to more enjoyable knitting for sure. At least for a while. I know that my older son Matt wants a pair of felted slippers for Christmas. Again, total product knitting for me. So I know that's coming up in the next few weeks, but that's not so bad. I've done so many I can practically do them in my sleep. Moving on to works in progress. Oh, actually, I'll show you this one. No, I'll go on this one. This is following on the theme of finishing things up. As soon as I finished the Honeybee Dance socks, I picked up these. I called them what did I call them? My happy hour socks. They are the passion fruit cooler colorway of West Yorkshire Spinners signature 4-ply in their, I think it's cocktail collection. And that's 811 is the color number for this section. And then I did a coordinating heel in same yarn, 240 butterscotch. So I had already had this one done for quite a while. I think I cast these on in, I think, July, something like that. And so I had made it, I think I was about maybe this far down the leg when I picked them back up. So I have finished the leg, done the heel, and probably halfway down the foot now, close to halfway anyway, before I do the toe. I had to look back because I was looking at this sock and it didn't look like my usual yarn over short row heel that I normally do. And so I looked back at my project page. I hadn't put any notes. I looked in the bag. Sometimes I'll put a little sticky note in with what I've done. Didn't have that either, but I kind of figured out that I had done a German short row heel because I had cast these on shortly after doing the Astrantia socks by Helen Stewart, which featured that kind of heel, and I was kind of experimenting with it. So I dug that pattern out and used it as a reference for doing the second heel. I think they're slightly different. I don't think it's enough to matter. They're for me, so nobody's going to be examining my heels that closely. But I love this yarn. I've always loved this colorway, and so I am enjoying the knitting. I realized why I had put them down in the first place is I'm doing the Vanilla Bean pattern by Emily O'Grady, which is just a slip one, knit one every time that you change colors. And because you have to do that, you have to be paying some attention in order to remember to change colors or to remember to do the slip stitches when a new color comes up. And I think I have put it aside because at the time it took more, even though it doesn't take a lot of concentration, it was taking more concentration than I could handle at the time. I think it made it hard to do card knitting with them or TV knitting. So I think that's why they got put away, and then they just got kind of forgotten about. I did take them on my trip to Europe. They did not make it out of the suitcase. So I'm glad to be kind of on the last stretch, and those should be done in a few days. Last thing I've been working on is another pair of socks. These are my Boo socks, knit out of Sea Turtle Fiber Arts Ridley sock in the Streckles patterning in the Boo colorway. Here are the skeins. That's what it looks like. I picked this yarn up at Knit City. They are Halloween socks. Obviously, they will not be done, or did not get done for Halloween this year. Oops, I've got... so you gotta untwist this yarn. It's wrapped around a needle. Oh, of course, I just succeeded in going the opposite direction that I needed to go in, and now it's twisted twice around that needle. Okay, just about there. Sorry. I just know if I hold it up like this, it'll be disaster. So, sock number 1, I think last week when I showed it to you, I had just finished the picking up for the gusset. So when we drove around doing errands on Saturday, I took these with me. So I had been working on the leg of this one. So when I got to the point where I'd finished the leg and needed to do the heel flap, I put this one down and picked this one up and started decreasing for the gusset. So I still have a few more rows to do that to get back to my original 32 stitches, but these two are well on their way, and I'll work on them over the next week or so, week or two. We'll see how long it takes to actually finish them, but that's my goal, is to finish these up soon too. And that will get 1, 2, 3, 2 out of the 3 pairs of socks I have on the needles right now off the needles, and then I'll feel like I can cast on another pair of plain socks. I did not work on my Downtown Mystery socks at all this week, but that's my next focus. And as I mentioned last week, I have to decide whether I'm going to take them back to the leg and eliminate a pattern repeat, or if I'm going to play yarn chicken and see if I can finish the sock with the yarn I have remaining, which is about, I think on one pair I have 16 grams, and on the other, or on one sock I have 16 grams left. The other I have 17 grams left, and I'm not convinced that's enough to finish the sock. So still weighing my options there. So that's it for all my knitting. As I mentioned at the top of the podcast, I also did some more quilting this week. And so I continued my work on my rainy day quilt. Came out of Quilt As You Go Made Modern by Jira Brandvig. And I used, the fabric was Sweet Reverie by Boundless. So when I talked to you last week, I had finished stitching quilting all the squares and squaring them up, and I had come up with my final layout. And so I have put all the squares together, and I did the backing and sewed the binding on, and all I have left to do is to hand stitch the binding to the back. So I'm going to give you a really good look at all these squares because I just love this fabric. So little bicycles, keys, Eiffel Tower, stamps. It's kind of, I don't even know how to describe it, almost like a little notebook. More bicycles, some French words, more Eiffel Towers, some floral, more words, more keys, another notebook, and more flowers. So the other half of the quilt are exactly the same squares, just in different formation. I have to tell you, whenever I end up doing the backing, I end up with scratches all over. I don't know, well, you can see they're healing up, but I end up with scratches and little nicks and cuts all over my hands and forearms because the quilting pins are sharp. I always end up all scratched. Not a good look. Anyway, I will sit down with this probably when I watch TV or watch some podcasts or something, and stitch this up over the next week or so, I'm hoping, and then I will have a new quilt. I would like to just see if that book's here. No, it's not. It's in the living room. I would like to make another quilt out of the same fabric. As I mentioned last week, I have enough of the fat quarters to make 2 quilts. And one I'm really tempted to try is a kind of a scrappy quilt. And you cut out your squares, you do a random cut across all of them in the same place, and then you sew two different fabrics together. You do that for all your squares. And then you do another cut in the same place for all the squares. And then you take that half with another half and join them together. And the quilt I'm looking at, it has 3 cuts. So you end up with 6 different fabrics on each square and then join them all. So it's just a really neat concept. That's what I'm considering for the next quilt, because I figured this one has nice large blocks of the different prints. So I feel like I can use these prints in smaller portions for the next one. That's the thing I love about doing this, is I love the fabric, so I really want to showcase them. So I'm glad that there are some quilts in that book just with big blocks. The Ballard blocks is another one that I've done to showcase the fabrics. But I also enjoy how the fabrics look when they're in smaller pieces and pieced together. So that I'm looking forward to doing that on the next one. So here's the book I was talking about. I figured I should go run and grab it. So Crazy Shortcut Quilts by Margarita McManus and Sarah Raffus. So here's an example of the quilt that I'm thinking of making. So you sew together each square, and then you put a piece of quilt batting and the backing fabric between it, and then you join the squares together with sashing. So I'll show you a picture of the square up close. And so there are 3 cuts without giving too much away. So you would cut your original squares, sew them together, then recut them with another line, sew them together, then recut them with a 3rd line, and sew them together and come up with something like that. I'll show you another couple of examples from the book. That's done with a more deliberate line rather than a random cut. You can have them go every which way. So anyway, it just seems like a really fun way to put a quilt together, and I'm anxious to try it. Last night before bed, I finished Little Town on the Prairie by Laura Ingalls Wilder. In this book, at the very end, Laura's future husband begins walking her home from different events, so that's the beginning of their romance. And also at the very, very end, Laura receives her first teaching certificate. And the teaching position is going to take place 12 miles away from home. And so the next book in the series, These Happy Golden Years, opens with her facing the challenges of that teaching position. And spoiler alert, her future husband also plays a major role in that. He comes in his sleigh each Friday to pick her up and take her home for the weekend, so that she doesn't have to endure a very unhappy and uncomfortable situation over the weekend where she's teaching, or where she's boarding while she's teaching school. So now that I've finished this book, I have read about half of the corresponding section in Pioneer Girl, the original manuscript on which the novels were based. So I'm going to go back, before I start These Happy Golden Years, I'm going to finish that section of Pioneer Girl, as I've been doing, kind of reading them back and forth. So looking forward to that. These Happy Golden Years is probably my favorite book in the series, so that one I'm anxious to read again. I also, this past week, began listening to The Clockmaker's Daughter by Kate Morton. As I talked about last week, this is an author I really love, and all of her books so far have been divided between the past and the present, and between the two there's a secret or a mystery that is unfolded, and this book is no different. One of the really interesting things about this book, and I think it works, I think it works, I like how it works, is that one of the narrators is a ghost, and her narration is divided between observing things that are happening in the present and her reminiscing about things that had happened in the past. And so between her and the modern day character, there's a story that is starting to unfold. So I'm enjoying that. I had listened to it while I was sewing my quilt together, and I haven't listened to it since Friday when I finished that work. So I'm looking forward to sitting down with probably some knitting, or maybe stitching the binding, something I don't have to pay a lot of mindful attention to, and then I can listen to the book. I can't work on anything too complicated while listening to an audiobook, because either the listening suffers or the work suffers. It's hard to pay that much attention to both at the same time. Now I'm going to talk about some very special acquisitions that arrived just after I finished recording last week's episode. So as I had mentioned in my Knit City recap, I had the great pleasure of meeting up with Susan, a podcast viewer. And she had come from back east to Vancouver to visit her son and to attend Knit City. And so it was really great to have the chance to meet up in person after we'd corresponded online for quite a long time before that. So my daughter Jessica and I spent most of our time hanging out with Susan at Knit City, and one of the booths that we visited was Gage Dye Works. I was really excited about seeing this yarn because I'd never seen it in person, only online. And Susan said she had quite a stash of Gage Dye Works, and also Caterpillar Green yarns, which is what it used to be known as. And she said that when she got home, she was going to send me some of her stash. So when she got home, she sent me photos of quite a number of skeins and said to pick out what I liked. And she so generously just wanted to give them to me. She wouldn't let me pay shipping or anything. So it was very exciting when this package arrived on Thursday. And I have to say the yarns are even more beautiful in person than they looked in the photo. So I had picked out, immediately my eye was drawn to this skein because it had Jessica's name written all over it. She loves rainbows, and to me this just screamed Jessica. So this is a colorway called White Light, and it is in their classic fingering weight yarn. So I can't wait to give it to her. She doesn't know it's coming, and I'm sure she'll make some beautiful socks out of that. And then for myself, my eye was immediately drawn to this skein of shawl stripes. It's in the peacock colorway, and on the in the photo I could see this blue and green. And what I didn't realize until I saw it in person is it also has this beautiful purple stripe. So I'm anxious to see that knit up into a gorgeous shawl. Now the difference between the classic stripe and the shawl stripe is that the classic stripe, all the colors are dyed in equal lengths, so that if you're to knit a pair of socks, for instance, all your stripes would be the same width throughout, like say an inch or 3/4 of an inch or whatever. If you were to use a classic stripe to knit a shawl that gets increasingly larger, like a triangular shape or a crescent shape, your stripes would get increasingly thinner and eventually probably disappear altogether, because as the rows get longer, the colors wouldn't go as far. Where with the shawl stripes, something that Gage Dye Works, or Caterpillar Green Yarns as they used to be known, one thing they're known for is the shawl stripe yarn, and it has been dyed in such a way that as you move through the skein, the color sections get longer, so that when you knit up a shawl that gets increasingly wider as you knit it, the stripes remain a fairly consistent width throughout. So I'm really excited to see how this knits up. Another skein that I just couldn't resist was this skein of classic stripe in the Ocean Sunset colorway. And I'm going to knit myself a beautiful pair of socks out of this. What I was not expecting when I opened the parcel was a fourth skein of yarn. Susan very generously sent this skein of MCN fingering shawl striping in the April Showers colorway. And I asked her, I just felt I couldn't keep it all, and I asked her if she would mind if I offered up a skein of yarn on the podcast to one of you viewers. And she said it was my yarn, I could do with it what I wanted, and so that's what I'm going to do. Now, when I was at Knit City, I bought a skein of April Showers with the intention of knitting a shawl. And later on, I had it in my mind that I had inadvertently bought the classic stripe instead of the shawl stripe. So when I saw this with the shawl stripe, I thought what I would do is keep this skein and offer this one up to you. Then as it turns out, I had bought the shawl stripe in this one after all. And so the only difference between these two skeins is the dye lot. They are both MCN fingering, which is 70% superwash merino, 20% cashmere, 10% nylon, and there's in a 170 gram or 6 ounce skein, there's 548 meters or 599 yards. What I have decided to do is I really like the darker dye lot better. And so I'm going to keep this one, and then I'm going to offer up the skein to one of you. Make a beautiful shawl. I was looking online, and I saw this colorway knit into a asymmetrical triangular shawl. I think it was called the Stormy Sky shawl. So that's what I'm strongly considering for my skein. But this would look lovely in any sort of triangular or crescent shape or asymmetrical triangular shawl. So here's what you have to do to win. I'm going to open up a special thread in the Ravelry group for the giveaway. So go on over to the Ravelry group. You can either find it by clicking the link from the blog. Here's the blog address. Click the link to the Ravelry group, or else go on Ravelry and search for A Stitch in Time podcast under the groups tab. You must be a member of the group to win, and only one entry per person. So because this yarn is called April Showers, and because we've had so much rain lately, I decided we needed some positivity. And so the prompt for you to answer is name something good, either about rain or about a rainy day. So if April showers bring May flowers, that's something positive that comes out of rain. Or it might be a cozy day indoors on a rainy day outdoors. So just write something positive about rain. At this time of year, it's easy to get a little bit depressed when it's dark and stormy and gloomy and cold and damp. And you feel like it's going to be like that forever, because probably quite a bit over the winter time, that's the kind of weather we can expect. So let's inject some positivity into our day and find something good to say about rain. My podcasting schedule is going to be a little erratic over the next few weeks. And so what I'm going to do is leave that thread open until the first time I record in December. So you've got lots of time to go over and enter if you wish. And I will announce the winner on my first podcast in December. So good luck. Obviously, in writing already have thanked Susan for her generosity, but I'll do it in sort of in person. So again, once again, Susan, thank you. I'm embarrassed by the riches, but happy to be able to share the wealth. So thanks for that opportunity. All right, what's been going on this week? Well, Halloween, obviously. Last week I recorded on Halloween. For the past few years, we've been going out with the grandkids because it's really fun to see them dressed up and see all the other costumes and such. Where we live, we have, we're just on a regular residential street, but just the way it's situated, we have never gotten very many trick-or-treaters, because when you get to the end of our road and turn, it's blocks before there's another residence. And so we don't tend to get that many. This year we decided to stay home. The weather wasn't supposed to be that great. And so we decided to stay in where it was dry and warm and give out trick-or-treats this year. Well, we had one person. One. So sad. I think normally we're lucky if we get 10, but I was kind of disappointed to only have one trick-or-treater this year. It was a little girl. Better than nothing, I guess. But and as it turned out, the rain did hold off. It wouldn't have been too bad an evening, but we'd made our decision. So anyway, our Halloween was a bit of a bust, but I hope everyone else had a great time. I know some houses get hundreds of kids, but last Friday morning I spent at the dentist having a crown removed and prep work done to have my crown replaced this coming Friday. So that was less than pleasant. Actually, I was really kind of nervous about them taking the old crown off, and that part proved to not be so bad. Much better than I'd anticipated. The next part wasn't that it was so bad, it just took a long time, and then you've got to put this goopy stuff in your mouth to make molds for the new crown and all that, and so I had a terrible taste in my mouth for the rest of the day and have a temporary crown on. It's actually, I've had several crowns. This is the best temporary crown I've ever had. It almost feels like a regular crown or regular tooth. So the dental assistant who made it up did a really good job. So I'm hoping, I've had some sensitivity and discomfort with that tooth, which is why I was having the crown replaced in the first place. So I'm really hoping that the new crown will take care of some of those issues. So we'll see. Let me see. Yeah, as I mentioned, we had run some errands on Saturday, and then I spent the rest of the weekend knitting. So we had a nice lazy Sunday in that sense. And this week's fairly uneventful, except that I'm prepping for the weekend. We have, my mom is coming Friday, and she's going to be staying at our house part of the time. And then we have my niece's baby shower is on Saturday. And then while my mom is down, we're trying to find a good time for everyone to get together to celebrate our fall family birthdays. We tend to celebrate our birthdays in bunches. And it was my turn to host. The only time that really worked for everyone was this coming Friday evening. Normally we do a dinner on a weekend, Saturday or Sunday. So what I've decided to do is just do appies. And because a lot of people are working, so they won't be there till evening anyway. And so I'll make a pot of chili and then have some various appies for everyone. But it'll give us all a chance to get together for the first time in a long time. So looking forward to that. But that means this week I really, really need to clean my house because it's a disaster. And so that's why I'm recording today. I'll get this edited and uploading, and then I can concentrate the rest of the week on getting prepped for my upcoming house guest and party and all that. Yeah, so with my mom here, I am not sure when I'm going to be recording next. I may not get to record next week at all. Not this coming weekend, but the next weekend, Cameron and I are going to Vancouver Island to visit his family. So we're going to be away for 3, possibly 4 days. And so it may not be till that following week that I record. I really don't know. A lot of it's up in the air. What I do almost practically guarantee is that by the time I talk to you again, I should have maybe 1 or 2 things finished and hopefully some new things cast on. So I hope you are well until then. I thank you very, very much for tuning in and joining me today. Putting up with my what seemed like a long rambling podcast. I hope it's not nearly as long and rambling as it seems in my head. Once again, if you're interested in winning the skein of yarn, go over to the Ravelry group and enter into that. Again, must be a member of the group to win 1 entry per person. And I will draw that in the first podcast in December. So I hope you all have a wonderful time until we meet again. Take care, enjoy your crafting, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.